All right. Hey, Ren, real quick before I get started, just make sure you got me on camera.
Yep, we gotcha.
Okay. All right, and I think we're live. So I want to welcome everybody to our first town hall of 2023. This is the first legislative session of the new term. And I think I'll start by just saying thank you to everybody who participated in the election. I don't know that we've had any formal gatherings since then, but it is extremely humbling to serve another 4 years as your state delegate. As many of you know, it's a competitive seat, but we overwhelmingly won. And I think that, it's just impressive all the hard work each and every one of you put in to making that happen. We worked our tails off. And I think in the end, it showed. We won by 12.5 points, I think. So, that's a pretty big margin for something that should probably be a 2 to 3 point race. So we outperformed almost every other representative, to include the 2020 presidential election, which is really rare. And so I just want to take a second to thank each and every one of you. Next, I want to say I hope everybody had a great holiday, whether you celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas. I hope that you were able to spend some time with family and loved ones. Funny side story about me, it was Penny's first Christmas. However, it was 10 degrees and a pipe burst in my house and flooded out my basement. So I spent the day driving from my family's house back to St. Mary's and dealing with that for a while before getting up there to see my family. So it wasn't an ideal situation, on my daughter's first Christmas, but it was, nonetheless, we got everything resolved. I'd like to thank everybody in the community who helped us out. And frankly, nobody is more thrilled to have 65-degree weather right now than I am after what we just went through. Just some some initial thoughts here on the town hall. Just a reminder, you do have a Q&A section. We had a lot of people submit questions. We will get to those at the end. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Obviously, we're on here at 7 o'clock, but we give people a few moments to join. But we're going to wrap this thing up, I think, by 8:15 at the absolute latest, because I know everybody's got things to do this evening. On the screen, that is the office location in Annapolis. We're on Bladen Street. I am in the same office as I was in last session, which is in the Economic Matters Committee room. And there is the office number, which you can reach me or Katie Meadow, who has joined our team. And she is my new legislative director. So as many of you are familiar, the face of the franchise, as I always say, is Ren. She does pretty much everything, and she interacts with so many of you day in and day out on district or local community issues. But really, the person who's the expert and is navigating, getting resources or lining up testimony or helping constituents figure out how to file XYZ form is Katie. And we're super lucky to get her. She came over from Jessica Feldmark's office, Delegate Jessica Feldmark from Howard County. And so we're extremely happy and fortunate to have her join the team. Next slide, Ren. Okay, so still on economic matters, and I am still the vice chair. And as many of you heard me say, C.T. Wilson is the chair. He is from Charles County. And, it gives Southern Maryland a really powerful voice on how Maryland's economy is going to be shaped for the next 50 years. Additionally, we both come from military backgrounds, and so it is good for the area because both of us are focused on Pax River, Andrews Air Force Base, JBAB, Indian Head, and all the Maryland installations. And we often think about policies on how they affect not just the base, but really the runoff economies as well. We have restaurants, et cetera, that open near those fence lines and where all the employees come off and then they, dine. That's just one example, or they get their oil changed. And so we continually think about problems from that mindset. And I think that that is an advantage for our area. On the bottom there are subcommittees. I think the only one of note for everyone is today it was announced I'll be the chair of public utilities. And I would say economic matters is the most powerful committee in Annapolis. And certainly it's humbling to be the vice chair of that committee, which is for the military folk out there, it's basically an executive officer, number 2. But to have public utilities, that is one of the 2 major subcommittees. And so anything to do with utilities, rates, anything that would impact ratepayers, whether it's the Empower program or STRIDE, that'll all come through now my subcommittee as well. And so we will have more of an opportunity to continue to shape legislation and make sure that SMECO is a leader and set up for success for all of you. Because as you know, SMECO is Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, means we all own it. We have some of the lowest rates in the state, and we have a very good utility company. Many other areas cannot say that. And so the relationship between myself and SMECO will continue to grow. Getting into the legislative preview. So right now, we have 10 bills, I think. There are a couple more that we are considering drafting, but we're going to navigate those. I'm going to go through the ones that right now we are trending, we will file them early in session or, in the near future. Permanent daylight savings time, there's no change on this one from the previous 3 years. I always laugh about this. This is easily the most popular bill we bring. I'm not leading a national charge on this topic. The way I look at it from a personal standpoint is I just want them to stop changing my clocks. It drives me nuts. I don't really care one way or the other, but popular vote has taken us to permanent daylight saving time. It's actually saving, there's no plural. And so there's 2 triggers though. The first is the federal government has to modify the Uniform Time Code. And then the second is all the surrounding states, including the District of Columbia, also has to adjust to permanent daylight saving time. So it's not like if the Uniform Time Code is adjusted, Delaware, which has already passed this, they will go into effect. Maryland still would remain on the time that it is and will continue to adjust until Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, and DC all did the same, because I don't want us to be on a different time zone than our neighboring jurisdictions. We have a lot of people, even from Southern Maryland, who get on a bus every morning and commute to DC. I don't think it's that challenging, but I don't want to add an additional hurdle on people's everyday lives. The individual retirement accounts tax modification, this is actually a great example of a constituent bringing us a bill, and we are putting it in on their behalf. And it allows IRAs, Roth IRAs, rollover IAs, SEP IRAs, they're all going to be treated the same as an employee retirement system when we determine state taxes. And so it's for residents who are at least 65 years or older, and there's some other eligibility, but basically it adjusts your gross income down. And so it puts you on the same footing as other employee retirement systems. The enhanced uninsured motorist coverage, it's an opt-out program. Currently, we do have this in Maryland, but it is an opt-in. So you have to make an affirmative choice to opt into that coverage. This would just simply switch it to an opt-out. But I think the best way to describe this is through an example. It is more commonly known to most people as stacking. So let's say 2 drivers get into an accident, you and me, and I am at fault. So you are driver A, and you have $20,000 in coverage. I'm driver B, and I'm at fault, and I have $30,000 in coverage. I cause $50,000 of damage to your car. In most people's minds, they think because I have $30,000 and you have $20,000 and I'm at fault, you get to capture my $30,000 and you're even. $50,000 in insurance policy and $50,000 in damages. That is actually not the case unless you select enhanced underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage. So this allows you to stack or capture if you are in the program, so that those two policies combined or can be combined, and more or less makes that individual whole in many, many, many cases. We would be the 33rd state to change it to an opt-out, and you can still opt out for the program. But I think that there is good public policy reasons, such as the fact that more people are covered for less expense, or well, I mean, obviously the premium slightly go up, but there is less risk of being stuck with an egregious bill. Because I can tell you, if you needed, let's just make it easier, you had $5,000 in coverage and I had $5,000 in coverage, and you couldn't capture me and your car was damaged for $10,000, most people don't have the means to continue or to purchase, go out there and purchase another vehicle for what they had to make them whole if it's totaled. The next one, we have brought this several years in a row. It's a criminal law. It's an indecent exposure to minors. Many of you have heard me discuss the situation, but it increases the penalty to minors who expose, or excuse me, it increases the penalty to adults who expose themselves to minors and makes it up to 5 years in prison. And the real reason for this is not so much the penalty in terms of jail time or potential jail time, but it's also, it triggers the federal government to remove an individual's clearance. And the example that happened here in our county was an individual exposed himself to minors. The individual was penalized, but the penalty wasn't harsh enough. And that individual was able to keep their clearance, move to a different state, and frankly, they got another job paying them a pretty good salary. And so we just want to remove the opportunity for somebody to continue to have a clearance after doing something of that nature. The next one is a newer bill, which kind of shocked me when I first heard it. It simply makes sex trafficking of an adult a felony. Currently, it is a misdemeanor, which I find to be crazy, but you know, it should be punished or punishable 1 year and over, and that should be a felony on someone's record. There is a niche there, and we're trying to work through. That's fine, Ron. I could just stay here. We're trying to work through the situation of somebody who is put into forced prostitution. We don't want to penalize people who, you know, were forced into an unfortunate scenario or situation. Health occupation spousal licensure transfer. This one is frankly a passion of mine and something that I care deeply about. It essentially says for health licensing, and so we will use nurses as the best or easy example. If an active duty member, it is only for active duty member spouses. If they are PCS to a station in Maryland and they reside in Maryland and their spouse has a nursing license in, pick a state, Missouri, Maryland will honor the Missouri license so long as that individual's spouse is still an active duty member. And I think that it's good for families. You now have the opportunity for somebody who just moved into a new community, has probably done several moves in the past, and they can immediately get right into the workforce and give themselves an identity, and make friends and assimilate, and it's easier for them. Second, and on that same vein, or in that same vein, it allows for people, or excuse me, it allows for employers to have an easier time filling vacancies. And we saw that through the pandemic. There was a labor shortage, and this is one way to try to augment that and make it easier for the hospital, let's just say MedStar, to bring in a very qualified nurse or any, you know, radiology tech or whatever the need is. The argument against the bill, honestly, is that the standard of care is going to be lower. And, I just, there's not a lot of proof to demonstrate that. It just seems like it's protectionism of a certain industry. And, I don't agree with that. I don't think that somebody with a California license or somebody with a New York license is going to provide any less standard of care here in Maryland. And frankly, you're still operating under the Maryland parent company's license. So MedStar has a license. They're going to sign off on it. They're going to have their own procedures. They're going to have doctors here, and somebody to check up on that. So, I don't really follow the argument that somehow we're going to get worse care. That's one. And the second part to that is how many active duty spouses actually have active health licenses. And on top of that, then how many of them actually want to participate in the workforce? It can't be, it's not millions of people, but for those that it does impact, it is absolutely going to make a huge difference. Continuing kind of on the sexual harassment theme, and this has kind of come up and just become a niche issue that we feel strongly about. Many of you have probably read paper on the situation in Maryland where an individual had a sexual abuse case against another individual, that the abuser was a state employee. After being sentenced to quite a lengthy sentence, they were still able to keep their pension. And so all the bill says is simply if a former or current or former state employee is convicted of rape, which is a very specific offense, he or she forfeits their pension, and that would, frankly, I think that is the right answer. Why should somebody who's going to go to jail for 25 years, 30 years, why should the taxpayers continue to float the pension? I don't think that is good government. I don't think that's prudent spending of our dollars. And frankly, that individual forfeited the right to have the pension that they worked many years for. They lost that right when they crossed that line. On the veterans theme, again, we are going to do tuition waivers for eligible dependents of veterans who are missing in action or prisoners of war or disabled at a certain threshold. The VA makes these determinations, and so there's nothing from the state in terms of making a determination. However, if a family member or loved one is killed in combat, the VA pays 100% for that individual's dependents to go to college. In many of these other instances, in an MIA, POW, or 100% disabled, the VA may only pay 50% of the eligible dependents' tuition. And what we're simply saying is Maryland will cover the additional 50% to allow for kids of that very narrow group, to offset their tuition. And it will be nothing out of their pocket, and Maryland institutions will honor that. Sexual abuse of minors, this is a cross file for Senator Bailey. This also is in response to an incident that took place in our county. It played out, there was a couple articles about it, but the bottom line is a stepfather, he sexually abused the children. The children were below a certain age. You do not automatically go on a lifetime registry in some instances. And so that individual, the stepfather, was able to fall off the registry list, regain custody of the kids, and became a repeat offender. All the bill would say is that if you commit an act of sexual abuse to a minor, you go on the lifetime registry. You can petition to get off it, but I think that you should petition to get off it and go through all the hurdles. It shouldn't just automatically happen or be something that triggered just because of an arbitrary date that we've set. You should take active steps, in that to regain custody, and hopefully that prevents an instance like this from happening and kids having to go through this. The last one, this one will take a little bit to talk about. So we'll talk about in-district voting. And there were many questions regarding this that came in, a handful or so. And I'm just going to talk about it here. Just kind of makes sense from this. First off, we're not going to call it House Bill 655. It will not have the same number if presented again. So there's no point in calling it 655. Good marketing the first go, but it's not. It is in district voting is the intent. All the bill says is that votes from a district must come from a district, from that district, and it can't be diluted through other districts. That's it. That's all the bill does. Every other election that we conduct, it happens at this means. You elect your senators who represent Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania. They don't get a say on who Maryland's senators are. It happens at your congressional district, Maryland District 5, Maryland District 6 or 2. They don't get to say, have any kind of say in Steny Hoyer. It happens in District 29B. That's who has a say on who represent, my seat and who represents them in Annapolis. And so that is not diluted either. And so that is all the bill does. I can tell you we've begun to have the conversations about the political pathway to passing the bill. And so we are currently working both with the incoming administration as well as the Senate. And we've begun to have the conversations in the House about the viability to getting all the way through. The hiccup last time was Senate President Ferguson, and where he was in the chamber and the Senate as a whole. And so, we're going to address that pretty early on. But this is a second example. I mean, most of these bills here, besides the health occupation license, are really bills that people from the community brought. And I can tell you for in-district voting, I didn't want to make my entire campaign about it, but it seemed like it came up every single solitary, forum, not brought up by me, or frankly, a lot of times even by my supporters. But as it continued to come up, I frankly heard from a lot of my supporters. And, I think that the overwhelming majority of people who are in my camp want it. I don't even really think it's close, to be honest with you. I could tell you that, to me, the bill just makes logical sense. Like, I don't understand, like, Lexington Park has different needs than Mechanicsville, just like, Southern Maryland has different needs than Baltimore City. And so all we are saying is that, at whatever election, in this instance, county commissioners, people should have the ability and the right to elect who represents them at any level of government. That's all we're saying. I don't have to give a history of at-large voting, that people ran wild with and just made up things that we never said. Nobody ever called anybody anything. But that seems to be the talking point, because there's no other logical explanation for not doing it, other than somebody got offended about something that wasn't even said about. So, the intent right now, we're going to bring the bill forward, and we're working on coalitions to get it through. So it'll be a fight, as many of you remember. I can think of maybe 4 or 5 bills that I would say were the most contentious bills of my first term. This one took the longest on the floor. And so there's something to be said for that. And so this is not an easy lift. And I think everyone here needs to recognize that. Additionally, I'm not going to entertain putting any amendments on the bill. So, the bill is going to be straightforward. It's going to be like 2 lines, but really that is in response to my camp and many who want to see the school board reformed and, other, forms. And the bill is going to be simple. If those other bills are brought, I'll happily co-sponsor. Let me know when they're proposed. But this is going to be narrowly tailored. And I have yet to hear a reason, a logical reason against it. So, I don't buy the argument that somehow multi-member districts are the same that happen in the state level. First off, it's a different level of government, but that would be fine. But another argument has been is simply, oh, well, Charles County has a 3-member district. They do, and we can have a real conversation of whether a district should be multi-member or not. But the truth is that even though it's 3 members from that one district, the votes still come from the district. So it's not the same argument, and it is intentionally made for confusion. And it's not a true statement. And for, some of the opponents of gerrymandering or multi-member districts, and a lot of that nationally needs to be banned. Hopefully Congress will, pick a speaker and quorum in and fix that. That would be great. Go down to all single member districts, both state and federal. We are not in that position. But again, that has nothing to do with this bill. Nothing. It is just some red herring argument that is a talking point that doesn't really address the bill. So, I don't really follow it, and we're fully prepared against that argument. I don't really think many other people buy it either. So it's not a winning argument. But I will continue to update each and every one of you as we go through the steps. But I guess that's really the whole gist of in-district voting at the moment. But again, it will not be House Bill 655. So, all right, these are some of the bond initiatives. This is early on in this process. And again, this is funds and money that we have brought back to St. Mary's County, or this is a way that we brought back money to St. Mary's County and really the region. And I'll talk about the Da Vinci machine here in a second, which is actually in Calvert County, but it's good for the area. But the 2 priorities, the first is solar projects for firehouses in my district. The Ridge Volunteer Fire Department, they got me a quote. It's about $190 some odd thousand. So we're going to put in a bond bill for $200,000 to help them. And then the other one is Bay District Volunteer Fire Department. This actually might end up being a multi-year effort. Many of you know, I live right off of Chancellor's. They have that second station there at Bay District. So they have 2 facilities. You can't aggregate solar. So one farm can't supply to 2 different locations. There's a lot of reasons for that. But the goal here is to at least begin and maybe even get one of the 2 stations set up, and then we'll come back and probably get funding for the other one. I don't know what the total cost will be yet. I think that it's a little bit more challenging for Bay District, but we are committed to working with Keith Fairfax and the leadership there to make that happen. A couple reasons to do it. One, obviously, greener energy. That is the wave of the future, and it kind of gets us out in front of that, and it signals to other people like, look, even the pillar of our community, the firehouse, we can put that on solar. And 2, for these organizations, they eliminate a bill, which I'm sure is pretty hefty. I'm sure a SMECO bill, I've never seen a SMECO bill at Bay District, but I'm sure it's not cheap. And so it offloads a cost for them and makes things easier for those organizations, and then ultimately for you, the taxpayers, because then they don't have to pay, a couple $1,000 or $10,000 a year, for solar, or excuse me, for energy costs, and they can put that towards a new truck, new equipment, whatever, and ultimately it's less expenses overall and less tax dollars that are needed. The next one is the Da Vinci machine at the Calvert Health Medical Research Facility. And that is in partnership with Duke University. It's a big deal for our area. As many of you know, the cancer rates in Southern Maryland, and it's weird cancers, are higher. And Duke University kind of picked up on this, and they started doing some studies, and they want to look into it and further investigate. And in doing so, a community leader partnered with both Duke and Calvert Hospital to make that happen and bring it to the region. And it impacts much more than just people in Calvert County. This impacts all of Southern Maryland, parts of Prince George's, and parts of Anne Arundel County. And ultimately, it will be a place where you can go for treatment, whether that is chemo or get minor procedures done. I guess it would be major procedures done with a Da Vinci machine. The Da Vinci machine is essentially a very precise electronic surgical precision machine. It makes very small incisions, and it is used in this instance on specific types of cancer. The easiest one to think about is for prostate cancer. This used to be, men would have prostate cancer, which is abnormally high, both in Maryland and nationally in Southern Maryland. And so it used to be a couple weeks to have that procedure. With the Da Vinci machine, it's much smaller incisions, and that way that individual doesn't have to go all the way up to Georgetown Medical or all the way up to Hopkins to get a procedure done. They can simply go to this facility, get the procedure done, and they're not out of work for weeks. Additionally, like I mentioned earlier, there will be an opportunity for people to go get or receive chemo treatment. And it's, one thing I always say about our rural communities is we have the exact same problems as urban areas. People are people, but it's always compounded by distance. And I can think of 50 stories in the last year of friends, just hearing about other community people and leaders that drove their loved one all the way up to Georgetown, and they spent, a week in the hospital in Georgetown, and they drove all the way back home every night, and they were just trying to see their loved one, get their loved one the best treatment possible. And this is an opportunity to bring some of that care closer to the region. And so I think that this is a worthwhile cause and something that we are in on because it's good for St. Mary's County residents, even though it's not necessarily parked in St. Mary's County. And this is going to be good for Maryland. And so, I think that we have a moral obligation as a government to provide services to our people. That's, basically objective A. And so, the purpose of government is to help its people, and this machine will help its people. Okay. Next slide, we're in. All right, delegate scholarship. Before I get into this, the 2023-2024 scholarship, it's not actually, the dates are wrong here. I know that there are some students that still have some issues from last year's scholarship. We're working through those. Katie has been on the phone tirelessly. There's only one outstanding hiccup that I know is not resolved at the moment, and that has to do with an individual who is out of state, has a unique major, and is going to a school that doesn't necessarily partner or want to partner with our system. We've done everything on our end, but now it's kind of on the university to help the student out and capture the money, or allow him to capture the money. But almost all of the other problems that we've had, and there's been a few in the last 24 hours, we spent all day resolving, and those individuals during the next round of financial aid should see that money captured or released into their account. If it's not, please let us know ASAP, and we will get involved immediately. But I know many of you also reached out, hey, what's the scholarship application for next year? Ren, after getting off of work today, put it together. And so you can scan the QR code. Ren, can you put the link in the chat for everyone so they can click on
Sure
it?
thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
And if you scan the QR code, it'll take you right to the Google form and you can fill it out. We have a scholarship. Just a reminder, you have to be a district resident, or we prioritize district residents, and you have to be going to a Maryland institution, state institution. And then on top of that, there is exemptions, like I just explained. You can go out of state, but it has to be, you have to go out of state for a major that a Maryland public university doesn't offer. And the example, my very first year, we had somebody go to Virginia Tech, and they did something very specific in veterinary, in a veterinary school. And it was really obscure. I still don't even know what it was. And so they were able to capture the scholarship because Maryland didn't offer that. But fill it out, shouldn't take you too long. We have a scholarship committee, and they meet and they divvy it up and figure out who the awards are. There's a set allocated pot of money, and those individuals break it up, and I'm not involved really in the process until the execution phase. Link is in the chat. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so I mean, these are, many of you have heard me talk about this quite a bit, but I'll just touch on the $10 million expansion of the 5 and Great Mills Road intersection. That money is still committed to be released in July, and we are working with the Appropriations Committee, and I've already had multiple conversations with both finance committees as well as the governor's office regarding this funding and state highway. And so I'm hopeful with the incoming administration, we have a little bit of an easier time to just get this over with, put it behind us. And it's just a much needed infrastructure project for our area that improves quality of life. A flipping light in an intersection, it really doesn't have a political party. Democrats and Republicans and independents, and it doesn't matter who it is. We're just trying to get home. I'm not trying to sit at that intersection for 2 hours when it's raining, backed up all the way to Willows Road, and making everybody's life miserable. So we're going to continue to press forward, and this has been my #1 issue since we first started running. And like I tell everybody, I'm pretty much obsessed with this thing, and it gives me nightmares, and I'll feel a lot better once somebody gets a shovel and a jackhammer out. I will be there the first day, probably lighting off fireworks. With that, Ren, you can leave this slide up, and we'll just kind of take some answers or some questions. I know you've typed some out to me here, and you're so. The first one, does my position as vice chair of a major legislative committee give me more influence in passing legislative proposals? Yes, it does. First off, the way it will work for me, we have a new administration coming in. So I think many people are probably going to be interested in what do my first 3 weeks look like. I will be trying to walk around and introduce myself to people who I've never met before. Predominantly in the governor's office. But there will also be people in the legislature. There's 50 some new members. Todd Morgan from District 29C is one of those examples. Where I got to form relationships with those people. And as a vice chair, I'm really tasked with the newer members on my committee, making sure that they're set up for success. Additionally, I am in meetings that frankly not a lot of people, no other, elected official down here will be it. Obviously, Democrats in Annapolis are part of a supermajority. We have 100 plus members out of a 141 member body. And I'm in the room. And, it's not just, it's not just bills, but it's also budget issues and how we get resources back here. And I'm not aware of any other freshman delegate that was ever able to sit in a vice chair seat. And so it's humbling that I had that opportunity last year, finishing up my first term, but now that I have a full term underneath me, I have relationships made, and I'm in this seat. I think it's going to open up a lot more, and it's going to open up some doors for the community that probably weren't open since we lost John Bohannon as chair of appropriations. And just so everybody knows, chair of appropriations means he controls where every dollar in the state of Maryland went. And so having that, being back in the room, having that access again, being good friends with the chair of appropriations, and being on another major powerful committee, we're going to be able to deliver significantly more going forward for our residents. And I think that it's something that I'm excited about, and we've worked hard on, and I don't ever take it for granted because there really is some luck to this. Okay, what is the number one hot initiative on which you need the most support? I would say first and foremost, it'll be in district voting. We're going to need people to testify, not just live, but send written. And then especially those who have run for district office and, understand the current system. I think that their stories will be powerful. I also think that, another one that I'm going to work pretty hard on, if I had a number two, is the spousal licensure bill, and I'm working with the military community and the Navy Alliance to line up testimony for that. And so if you know any military families that had health licenses that struggled with that, that would be super helpful. If you could put them in contact with us, that would help us. Okay, next question. Ever since I moved to this area, everybody I know has told me St. Mary's County is bound to grow. However, every time I drive, I see more for lease signs for businesses. Since my lease is up this year, I may want to move to another location. What would stop me if there were signs? St. Mary's County is. What would stop me is if there were any signs that St. Mary's County is not a decaying area. Is there any proof of economic growth in the county? And since you were elected, what are you going to do to help? So yeah, I think that we've kind of touched on some of this and some of the money, and obviously there is state investment on the screen that certainly discusses some of the major economic initiatives and programs or funding that we've gone through. But additionally, we have been able to secure funding for the SCIF, which is a sensitive compartmentalized information facility. And we're making or essentially building two SCIFs, one in Indian Head, one at the airport. And the one in St. Mary's Airport is going to essentially, it's going to cost $1.2 million, or excuse me, $1.25 million. And we're going to put a 1,250 square foot building. And it's going to lure the Office of Naval Research down here to move to St. Mary's County. And they're going to house 3 workstations, small conference room with a VTC. They're going to have secure comms. And the entire facility is going to have controlled 24-hour access. And really, what we're seeing from this is a whole bunch of other businesses that want to come down here with O&R are going to want to set up shop here. And so that is going to continue to expand the business footprint that we have, continue the development and the growth out at the airport, which has been immense. And that facility is bound to be approved or slated to be approved at the January 25th Board of Public Works meeting. And so 3RGI, I believe, is the contractor. They have a couple small subs, but basically, the RFP process is finished. And once that is delivered, that is another example of continuing economic development. And then the other one that we are working with another community organization to build a small business hub right there on Great Mills Road to continue the revitalization, continue the investment, and it should lure many small businesses into that space at a discounted rate for rent, so that way they can continue to thrive. And that money that is taken in will then be reinvested into the community in that area and continue to build up, through one of the local community organizations. And that's the intent and the hope, and that's kind of the plans that we have going forward. Okay, how is mental health in St. Mary's County being addressed? Yep, so a couple things. The first is the mental health hub, which is, a premier facility, and that was done with our health department, our fantastic health director, Mina Brewster, in partnership with PNC Bank, the county commissioners, the previous set of county commissioners, and that's not a slight on this one, but the previous set, they deserve credit for forming that public-private partnership. Myself and Senator Bailey also got a money for it, and that really brings mental health access, behavioral health access to the community in need, and right there where most people can walk to it and take advantage of it. And it's also next to the sheriff's department. So, there is a good public footprint there for safety that provides access to mental health, as well as, the sheriff's department, which is there for any response that is needed. Additionally, the one thing that we're working on is trying to do a mobile health vehicle or behavioral health vehicle, and essentially it would be a mobile unit. And so think of the behavioral health hub on wheels. We would be able, we would schedule in partnership with whether it's a church or another organization to rotate that through our community. And in the back, it would be essentially a telehealth. So there would be a pretty nice, Zoom system where you could have a screen and have a one-on-one meeting with a doctor or a psychiatrist. And then in the front, we could use that space for like a phlebotomist if somebody needed to get blood work done or testing, and bring that resource to people instead of making people travel ungodly distance to the resource. And so that's all we're trying to do. And I think that is a pretty big initiative, but it's a pretty simple concept, and Queen Anne County already does it. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. We want to just take what they did, have the blueprint, and get it here in St. Mary's County. All right, what's next, Ren? What is the status? I got it. I found you.
You see it.
Yep. What is the status of getting more high-speed internet down here? It's a great question. It's something that drives me bananas, especially if you are south of Gate 3. I know that is the further away from Gate 3 you get, the harder it is. But especially if you're on the eastern side of 235, I can think of a few places back in there where it's quite challenging, and it's challenging for rural communities as a whole. A couple things that we did last session, we set up an internet an internet hub and a department that will now be hopefully housed under the comptroller's office. And so that office's sole mission is two things. Its mission is two things. One is to ensure that there is a plan, a long-term strategy and plan that the state has to make sure each and every one of its residents has access. You'd be surprised. Sometimes there's not a lot of planning that goes on. Maybe you wouldn't. The second is to make sure that we are capturing both federal money, state money, and any grants out there. And this organization, their task is to do that. And then to, let's just say there were federal dollars out there, and there were through the CARES Act. For whatever reason, Maryland was late to the game, under the previous administration and not capturing all the CARES Act funding. And then, let's say the federal government gives $100 out. It doesn't, the federal government, when they do these things, more often than not, they don't say every state gets $2. They don't even break it up by population. So like California and New York, which have huge populations, they get $6, and somebody with 50 people, they get 50 cents. Doesn't happen like that at all usually. What happens is you got to apply for the money. And so if your state government isn't active in doing so, then you don't ever take advantage of it. And this is one where might seem awkward, but Kentucky, probably with Senate leader or Minority Leader McConnell, they're pretty effective at applying for these things. I do not understand why we have lagged, but that office is now up and running, and that is going to be their mission, is to capture those dollars and make sure that they're re-put into the community and invested in internet access. Additionally, this was 3 years ago, and we just started it, is what we would do is essentially joint trenching on when there is a new public road. You lay the conduit with the road. It increases the cost of the road minimal, very minimally, but it lays the conduit. And if you ever want high-speed internet or wiring, to come down that road, what happens is, in many cases, they re-dig up the road, lay the conduit, and relay down the road. So all we mandated was you got to put the conduit in as well. And if internet goes down that way, or another area wants to expand, it's easier to just run the wiring down the conduit. It's already laid, and people have access to it faster. And I would say the last thing that we're trying to work with and pilot, is, I know he's probably not the most popular guy in the world at the moment, but SpaceX, and I can't think of the Starlink, is trying to get some state money to purchase about 2,500 Starlink systems. And then what we do is we give those out to families in the school system that are in need, and they don't have to pay the $2,500 to get the router or whatever put on their roof. It is already taken care of, and then they experience an internet bill like anybody else, which frankly, when I talk to most people who don't have internet access, that's not what they're worried about. They're not worried about the $50 or $100 a month. They're worried about, it's going to cost me $7,000 to dig this wire 6 feet. It's crazy. But so be it. I am hopeful that we're trying to form some partnerships. We've begun the discussions that we can, get the first shipment in here, the first program set up here, and hopefully get these out to kids who are in need in our community. All right, what do we got? In-district voting, back to in-district voting. These will be the last two questions I think on in-district voting, because I touched on it quite a bit. What other Maryland counties would the in-district voting bill affect? It is Queen Anne, Garrett, St. Mary's, and Calvert. So those four. Charles was one, but they fixed theirs on their own. And then the next question is the in-voting district bill for the entire state or St. Mary's County only? It would be a statewide bill. So every other county would fall victim or be underneath the passage of the bill. what is being done to help those who struggle with food insecurity? So yeah, I mean, this is a prevalent problem here. And I think in the wealthiest state and the wealthiest country in the world, frankly, St. Mary's County is the 6th wealthiest county in Maryland by many metrics, not all, but many. It bothers me that not everybody goes home to a warm bed and a warm plate every night. And so, we have tried to help establish Feed St. Mary's and support their needs. We got them $250,000. I think it should be recognized that Bubby Knott donated the building. Similar to me, this is not so funny. They had a frozen pipe on Christmas and that burst. So I feel their pain directly. But we have tried to give them, excuse me, that's St. Mary's Caring. I apologize, not Feed St. Mary's. We've tried to give St. Mary's Caring, the facilities it needs to deliver resources and feed those in need. Additionally, I'll go back real quick. I know that Feed St. Mary's got set up, and I can think of a whole host of people that deserve credit. The Rotary Club, Julie Randall, Linda Limas, Mr. Hurlbert was involved in that. I mean, there's so many people that got that up and running. Mike Hewitt, Commissioner Mike Hewitt, was instrumental in that. He deserves some credit. And we're trying to support their needs as well. And then the last thing, hopefully trying to build like an entire distribution where we got Farming for Hunger $250,000 so they could open up a second site at historic St. Mary City. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Farming for Hunger, it is an incredible program that Bernie Fowler runs. He works with really former violent offending criminals, really violent offender criminals that are still incarcerated in the system. They run a farm, but it is much more than food. They run a lot of programs, team development programs, and it breaks down a lot of barriers. But in terms of the food portion of this, yes, they will grow food. Hopefully, but in addition to supplying more food to the Maryland Food Bank, they would, possibly be able to just go right directly into Feed St. Mary's once they have their operation up and running, and then Feed St. Mary's can support St. Mary's Caring and so on and so forth, and it goes right down the line. That would be, a dream to have all those systems working together, firing on all cylinders. Maybe we trying to build a hub or co-locate many things around St. Mary's Caring so that people can get multiple resources in one location, especially those in need. So yeah, how is Arizona able to deliver their own daylight saving time and not the surrounding states and not Maryland? They did not opt into the Uniform Federal Time Code. And so they and Hawaii can stay there on standard time, and they don't ever have to adjust. They're not on daylight saving time, they're on standard time. And so they don't ever have to change. And you could do that and opt out without any other surrounding states or without the federal government's approval, because that's the way it shakes out. And that's the way that the federal law is written, so that nobody else, you don't need the federal government's approval if you want to stay at one time or on one time. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm scrolling down here, reading the questions as Ren's just kind of putting them in order for me. What is happening with the Thomas Johnson Bridge, Solomon's Island? Yep. So, I think the first thing they're going to have to eventually do is they're going to have to finalize a plan for it. There is no plan. Every year, it seems like there's some sort of money allocated to it. Other years, it seems like there's federal money allocated to it. it only ever seems like the federal money is a small portion of it. To be clear, the total project is going to be about $700 million. And I know this is something Todd discussed at length, Delegate Morgan discussed at length when he ran. I know it impacts my district and my people. And so, we will, we're going to support, but the truth of the matter is, it is in his district. I'm going to let him and Senator Bailey lead. And I know that it is important. I'm sure they're on top of it. And so if there's something that I can do to help them in that, I will. I can tell you that they certainly need to finalize that plan before anybody can go after any money at all. And so, that is on state highway to do so. From my own personal infrastructure priorities, obviously 5 and Great Mills is at the top of that. It actually impacts about 3,000 to 5,000 less cars traveled than the intersection at 235 and 4 when all things were firing. So it is not exactly equal, but it's still a very large chunk. And 5 and Great Mills is going to cost $30 million. That's going to cost $700 million. It's a much more practical project, and I think it impacts more residents. Well, in my older district, it impacted much more residents. But even in the new district, I still think it impacts the bulk of my people over the bridge, especially with FDR Boulevard going up. Okay, last one we'll take, and then I'll wrap this up. Is now that the 2023 session has begun, how can you guys support me? I think it's a couple things. I mean, one, follow me on Facebook, share posts, share, retweet, sign up for email lists. You can go to Delegate Crosby at Gmail to get added. Just email us and we'll get you added to the list. If you know somebody else that isn't getting any, information or is curious, have them email so we can send them our updates. I also think that as bills come up, I don't know the order bills are coming up. I have no clue. That is something I don't control outside of ECM. And so we will find out when our bills come up 72 hours before they come up. I only know what I'm proposing, and then it's kind of out of my hands. And so following along as we go, we'll make sure we post or make people aware through emails, signing up to testify, and then reaching out to other areas, and other people that you have in the state, making sure that they're aware of some of the initiatives that we're trying to do here to help them build coalitions and have their, constituencies understand that St. Mary's County still needs just as many resources as anywhere else in our state. But I want to thank each and every one of you. I know that all have busy lives. It's the Thursday after the new year. Some of you probably would have rather enjoyed 50 degrees, 60-degree weather here in January. But I appreciate you all coming out this evening. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to text, call, or email us, or hit us up on Facebook. And I can talk you through any issues that you might be having and see how we can help or try to help resolve whatever issue you may be having, whether it's legislatively or with the administration or at any other level of government. So that is the purpose and why we're here, is to try to help you. But again, I want to thank you all for coming this evening and have a great evening. Thank you so much.